For me, it is absolutely an unlearning of what the world has told us we should be and how we should look and how we should behave and what we should want and what success looks like. And it's a remembering of who we truly are. And I think that's the magic of midlife, if we can get into that space.
Welcome to Your Second Act, the podcast that proves that life doesn't have to end at 40, 50, or even 60, because when it comes to living your best life, age is just a number. Hey guys, it's Michelle, your host, and thank you so much for joining me on another episode of Your Second Act. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to dive into a conversation with the lovely Megan Dalla-Camina, who is an award-winning leadership and empowerment expert and best-selling author of her latest amazing book called Women Rising: The Forces That Hold Us Back, The Tools to Help Us Rise. We'll be exploring a topic that's all too familiar to many of us, the inner critic. You know that voice inside your head that never seems to take a day off, the one that questions your worth, nags you to do better, or tells you that you're just not good enough. Yeah, well, that's the one. It's a voice that can hold us back from living authentically and chasing the things that truly light us up. In Women Rising, Megan delves into the powerful impact of the inner critic. There's everyday narratives that shape how we perceive ourselves and our place in the world. In our conversation, we'll unpack how these voices show up in our lives and why they hold so much sway, and most importantly, how we can reframe their messages to unlock our true potential and embrace a more fulfilled and powerful life. If you've ever struggled with self-doubt or felt held back, just like I have many times, by your own thoughts, this discussion promises to be truly transformative. So let's get straight into the episode. Megan, I want to start by thanking you for writing Women Rising. I recently had the pleasure of attending your Sydney book launch and brought my two young adult daughters, and they were absolutely blown away by your conversation with Tracy Spicer and the incredible sense of sisterhood that filled the room. And on the drive home, they were so excited. They were talking about feminism, empowerment, and how trailblazers like yourself have given them so much confidence for their own futures. So I just am so excited to dive into this episode with you because it was such a powerful experience that night, and just seeing all these women that you have helped over the years to get up, and you could see that they were in awe of you, and you could really feel it in the room. Would you not say so?
Thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing that about your daughters. I love that so much. Yes, I did feel it. I think it was a very unique experience that evening. Like something magical happened in that space that night. So it felt like alchemical. I don't know, something happened in that room. And it was that sense of community and sisterhood, and like we're all here together. So yes, I'm glad you felt that, and I'm glad, like, it's so amazing you got to experience that with your daughters, and then like
So much
they're
so.
so awakened by it. That makes me so
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think what I just loved seeing their faces. I kept on looking over at them, and because they said, we didn't know what to expect. We thought, well, what's this going to be about? And they were not expecting that. So it was really nice that we got to share that experience together that we'll forever remember. So yeah, really exciting. Now, when I was planning our episode, I had this flashback to a very famous monologue from the Barbie movie. And I thought, I want to start it with some of the monologue because I think it ties in really well with your book and your message. You have to be thin, but not too thin. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women because you're supposed to be part of the sisterhood. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, and never get out of line. It's too hard, it's too contradictory, and nobody ever gives you a medal or says thank you. That is so
Yeah.
powerful. I
So
mean,
powerful.
yeah, absolutely. I just thought that's a great way to start our conversation because I think as women, we have it so damn hard. And even though I feel we've come a long way, it's great that women like yourself, through your own experiences, have been able to bring it all together in this great book that I can't wait to discuss with you today. Now, I think a lot of us, we struggle with this inner critic that you speak so much about in your book. And we have that sense of we're not enough. Now, you identify these 13 archetypes that represent so many women's inner critic. And I guess for me, the ones that really stuck out to myself that I resonated with was the skeptic, experiences intellectual self-doubt, constantly questioning her intelligence and competence, the people pleaser, and the good girl. Now, I would have to say out of the 13, I probably resonated with most of them, but it just got me thinking, like, why did you focus on those specifically?
Yeah, so wow, so much in there. And like let's just take a moment for that Barbie monologue, right? Like that is, and I'd already written most of the book before that came out. And I was like, oh, we're in a zeitgeist moment around women and about women being in their power and that whole everything that you just read, like they are the forces that hold us back. That's part one of the book, the paradoxes of power that then influence and that we internalize as women as our inner critic. So that linkage is incredibly important. Like all of that external patriarchy and gender norms and gender biases and gendered expectations become the voice in our head, becomes that internalized patriarchy. So I think that's really important because so many of us as women, we don't make that linkage between those two things. And then so then we just think that all of those voices and stories that we're hearing are true and that they're our stories and it's our voice and it's not. So we have to acknowledge that. And then to your question, when I was writing this book, and I've been, on my own inner critic journey for, a long time and teaching inner critic work for about 15 years. And as I was writing this, like I wanted to go deeper and I wanted to make it more personal for people rather than, here's the inner critic and here are the tools and strategies. There's this piece in the middle that is, what does that flavor look like for you? Like, how do we get even deeper and more defined about that so that you can understand it better and know what to do about it? And that's where I started thinking about, well, what are the archetypes? Like, there are archetypes of the inner critic that take us to that next level. And that's where I came up with the 13. And, I've very much always been very interested in, Jungian analysis and the work of particularly the female Jungian um, leaders like Maureen Murdoch and Marianne Woodman and their take on women's journeys. And so I really started going into, well, what are these archetypes? So I came up with these 13 archetypes. There could have been more, there could have been less. But these are the ones that I feel from all of the thousands of women that I've worked with and all of my research really define women's experience
Mm.
and really define women's stories and the stories that they share with me and the stories that I see in all of my work that we have as women. So, yeah, that's where we came to the 13.
Ladies, I am so excited to be co-hosting a special event next February in Manly called Your Second Act, Thriving in Midlife. Join me and the amazing Emma from Emma's Nutrition on Saturday, the 1st of February, for a transformative one-day experience overlooking the stunning harbour. This is your chance to reconnect, recharge, and be inspired by an incredible lineup of speakers while enjoying delicious, healthy meals and snacks prepared by Emma herself. It's time to celebrate you and embrace this exciting chapter of life. Head to the show notes for the link to the event, and we can't wait to see you there. When I was reading it, and I read them the night of your book launch, the girls actually wanted to go through them all, and they were saying, Mum, which one do you identify with? I identify with this. And I thought, it's so interesting because we're all in our own heads, and we never stop to think that others are actually feeling exactly the same. But when I was in that room that night and women were getting up and speaking of their experiences, I thought, my gosh, because to be honest, Megan, someone like yourself, who I would put up on a pedestal and say, how successful is she? You have done so much with your life. I would think, why would you even feel that way? Why would you allow a man to make you feel that way in a work environment? Like I would think back in the day when I was working in corporate, I would look at women like you thinking, she's got it, she's moved through those stupid ranks that like someone like me would have felt like there's no way. I would have felt so intimidated. But here you are opening up saying, I felt all those things, but I just kept pushing through, and I guess to your detriment at one point where you just felt complete burnout and you had to walk away. But I think it's great that we're talking about this to make us all feel that, you know what, we are all the same. No matter where we are in life, we can all still feel these terrible thoughts that we have in our mind.
Yeah, it's so interesting listening to you say that. I mean, I hear that from women, not about me specifically, but we've had almost 10,000 women go through the Women Rising program in the last 4 years, and like they all say the same thing. Number one, I think it's just me. Number two, like successful women, whatever you call a successful woman is, that those women that we look up to,
Yeah.
we think that they would never have a confidence issue, that they would never have an inner critic issue. And every single one of them does. And I, look at examples from, like really famous, well-known women and the stories that they tell about their own inner critics and their own confidence issues. Like this is all of us. So, this is our work to do.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that men don't have an inner critic. They do have an inner critic, but it cuts differently.
Yeah.
And we're wired differently and we're socialized differently. The inner critic is the number one self-declared issue that women say holds them back
Mm-hmm.
from living the life that they want to live, from taking the actions that they want to take, from feeling how they want to feel about themselves and about their lives. And when we look at particularly midlife transitions, the way that inner critic can flare up as not only we change, but as the way society views us changes, it's a whole new inner critic ballgame.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit like having to relearn a new way of thinking because the conditioning has been so fierce, and we get to, say, our 50s, and all of a sudden we start to think, hang on a minute, I don't think I need to feel this way anymore. I don't want to feel this way anymore. But it's very hard to unlearn all those things, and that's where that inner critic comes in. So, like, what practical ways can women reframe their mindset, the way they do think about themselves?
Yeah, like it's interesting. You said the word relearn and then you said the word unlearn. And for me, it is absolutely an unlearning of what the world has told us we should be and how we should look and how we should behave and what we should want and what success looks like.
Yes.
And it's a remembering of who we truly are. And I think that's the magic of midlife, if we can get into that space. And I think this book is so powerful for women in midlife because so many of us don't see the forces that hold us back. We don't see or understand the patriarchy. We don't understand these paradoxes of power. We just think this is the way it is.
Hmm.
And what I find that when women really wake up to this, when we see the empowerment paradox or the leadership paradox or the motherhood paradox, the confidence paradox, the success paradox, and we start to understand the machinations of the world around us and how patriarchy has influenced and shaped the world, but also the world as we see it and the world that we exist in, there's so much agency in that for us,
Mm.
because then we can start to realize, oh, I'm actually not the problem. And it's not just me. And all of these things that have happened that have shaped the way that I think about myself can be untangled and unraveled. And then I can make different choices.
Yeah.
And whether that's a choice for I'm going to reach for a different thought, or I'm going to create a different belief about who I am in the world, and then I can take a different action for myself and, redefine who I want to be at this season of my life. And we can do that inner critic work. So, like, that first piece of understanding and awareness is so critical to then reorient ourselves
Yeah.
in the world, particularly in midlife, so that we can truly come into that power that, gosh, we've earned. Like,
Oh my
we've
God.
so earned it by the time we get to this age that
We
it's like,
have.
enough of this bullshit, right? Like,
Yeah.
let me
Yeah.
just step fully into my power. And one of the keys to stepping into our power is to really understand what's going on with our thoughts.
Mm.
So, in terms of your question around really practical things, number one, read part one of the book, right? Really understand what's
Yeah.
going on out there. And then read part two and understand, number one, what are the stories I'm telling myself about who I am, about where I am, and about like how I want to live my life and the choices that I want to make. And once we start to tap into those stories, that's when we start to see which archetype we are.
Yeah.
Like, are we the perfectionist, or are we the overachiever, or are we the good girl, or are we, the people pleaser?
Mm.
And then we can go deeper and we can do, well, why? Like, where does this come from? And how is this limiting me? And how do I start to really tame that shadow side of that archetype? Because all of the inner critic archetypes have a light side, they all have strength. So, how do we amplify the strengths? But how do we start to tone down and minimize those stories that are holding us back
Yeah.
and keeping us stuck? And there's lots of tools and strategies in the book, and we can go into any of them. But that's number one, catch those stories. And then number two, we get to start to challenge them and reframe them so that we can, be who we want to be and take the action that we want to take.
Yeah. Because I'm such a big advocate of really take the time to work out who you are. Because I think for a long time we've been told who we are. And
Mhm.
it's that relearning. And, one thing you did say, well, just touching on patriarchy, which I found really interesting at your book launch, you said the patriarchy doesn't necessarily even work for men, which I thought that was a
Yeah.
really interesting statement. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Like, we've so much of women's movements have been divisive. And like, thank goodness, right, for all of the women who've come before us
Mm.
and created all of the change for women. Nothing but respect. And at the same time, there's been a lot of divisiveness. Like, men are the problem, men are to blame, patriarchy is about men are, and all of that. The way that I look at it through all of my work and research and age now of seeing the world is like, patriarchy absolutely holds women back. It
Mm.
absolutely defines and confines who we are, how we should be, how we show up, what our value is. But it also does that in different ways for men around, well, this is who you should be as a man. This is what an ideal man looks like. Here are the norms of masculinity that you will be defined by. Here are the norms and definitions of success that you will be defined by as a man. And for some men, that works, right? Let's be clear. And we see those men, they're the ones in charge. But for a lot of men, that doesn't work for. It limits them and it stops them from doing what they want to do, parenting how they want to parent, and all of the rest of it. So I feel like, and I have this conversation with men because I support a lot of men in our male allies work. When you say that to men, you see them soften. You see them, and then they're more willing
Yeah.
to open up to a conversation about, well, what is the world actually like for women? What is the lived experience? How do I step in and be a better ally now that I'm not being blamed and, it's not this combative confrontation that you are the problem.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a big, and I write about that in the book. I feel like that's a big pathway for all of us to actually get to the next stage of equality that we're never going to get to if it's divisive.
How do you think the change is happening at the moment? Are you seeing change as far as equality, as far as even men being more open to sharing, to accepting that roles are changing, especially within the workplace? Because there was an interesting statistic that you have on your website that says only 8% of women are thriving at work, while 42% are either just surviving or hanging on by a thread, and they're completely burnt out. Now, that is a huge number. That's huge. That's a lot of people, a lot of women that are suffering. So, yeah, I mean, like, do you really think the change is going to happen? This is what I want to know, because I also do have a fear for my daughters as they start to go into the workplace and have those obstacles in front of them. And I'd hope to think that once they start their careers, that they're not going to have it like we had it.
That data is from our Women Rising 2023 the Voice of Women at Work report, which is also available for download on our website. And it was that, only 8% of women say they're thriving at work, so self-declared, and that a very large percentage are surviving or feeling burnt out. And like that is still consistent with what I see, for women in our community. We have thousands and thousands of women in our program and in our broader community. So I think that is true. And I think it's still true. And so many of the battles that we're fighting, we're still fighting. Like if you look at any of the external research, the research that just came out from Lean and McKinsey about women at work in the US, where we've made some progress at the top. But this middle piece where so many women are, this concept of the broken rung and just can't get up there. And how do we feel when we're working? And one of the findings from their research was, like we've seen some shift in the data, but the world of work still feels about the same as it did a decade ago
Yeah.
for women. And I think that's a very humbling point. And then we look at the chief executive women data in Australia that also came out recently that shows when we look at ASX 200 companies at the top, we're going backward. And like that's a fragile number. It goes forward, it comes back, it goes forward, it comes back because one or two women, make a big difference. But again, one of the reasons I wrote Women Rising and I do all of my work with my company, Women Rising, is because like we're just not seeing the traction. We're not seeing the change. And I absolutely believe, and I was in corporate for 18 years and I now work with more than 700 companies around the world, that for all of the good intentions, and there's a lot of good intention out there, we're still talking about the same things
Yeah.
and hoping that, we're going to talk about targets and quotas and this and that's going to break us through. And it's not. So we have to have a different conversation. Otherwise, yes, we're going to still be here and your daughters are going to have the same experience.
Mm.
And that's why I feel like the understanding the two sides of this equation, what's in the system, the paradoxes of power that I write about, that we need to be aware of because then we show up differently within it. And what is our work to do as women, our inner critic, our own empowerment, our mindset, all of the tools in part 3. If we could start having that conversation and really get under the skin of that and bring the men in as true allies all the way down and across our organizations, then we're going to start to see real change.
Yeah.
And I know this is true because I see it from the women who come through our program and I see it for the men who come through our male allies work. Like we see the shift in very real terms. But we need massive amplification of that. And your daughter's going, "Oh, okay. I didn't know any of that. And now
Yep.
let's talk about it." Because when we talk about it, things shift
Yeah,
for
exactly.
them individually and then also collectively.
Now, a lot of the women that you help, I'm assuming a lot of them are in midlife and also still have careers. What are their issues as such? Like, what are you finding that they're struggling with in the workplace?
Yeah, I'm so passionate about this conversation. Like I feel like for so long we never talked about midlife. It's like you get to midlife, just go be quiet, sit in the corner, right?
Exactly.
Like be like we're done. You're no longer
That's it.
beautiful and you're no longer having children.
Yeah.
So like
You're
society, patriarchy, we're
invisible.
done with you. You're
Yeah.
invisible, right? We
Yeah.
don't care about you. Go over there.
Yeah.
And I love so much about like this is where we have seen so much change. Like for women coming into midlife, like you never like I remember when I was growing up, like in the 80s, you would never see women in, over 40, 45, certainly not 50 and 60, represented publicly. Like they weren't leaders, they weren't in movies,
No.
they weren't models, they weren't any of that. And now they're everywhere. Like
Mm.
you want to go find examples of incredible, powerful women over the age of 40, 50, and 60, just go look, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's a massive shift that we've seen, and I'm so happy about it. But so many women, when we go through this midlife transition, feel invisible, get really tapped into that story of I'm no longer valuable. Like, what is my worth now?
Yeah.
Like my looks are changing, or my career's changing, and I don't know who I am anymore, and I don't know my place in the world, and nobody sees me anymore. Like that is such a common experience for women. So I see a lot of that. I also see from a career perspective, a lot of women think it's too late.
Mm.
They think I've missed it. I
Yes.
can't change it. I can't go for it. Like I'm done, and it's why I talk so publicly about doing my PhD. Like I'm 54. I've just started my PhD and like I want everyone to be in this age and go, what's my next season look like?
Exactly.
And be excited about that and get curious about, maybe the kids have left home or the kids are older and you've got a bit more freedom. Maybe you're now, you have both sides, right? Aging parents. It's
Yes.
where I'm at. Aging parents that need support. My son still lives at home, even though he's 23. Very independent though. But like, what does this season look like?
Yeah.
And like, how do you tap into a mindset and a belief system and tools and a community like yours that shows you and opens up all the possibilities for you in this stage of your life?
Yeah.
And then this work, really understanding what is my inner critic? What are the stories that I'm telling? And how do I do this work to transform that? Because when we do that, that's when everything opens up.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's so important, and that's why I'm telling everyone, go out and get Megan's book because I absolutely loved it, and it's the type of book that you can just refer back to whenever you're unsure about things. And it's quite easy to use. So, again, thank you for writing it because there is so much information out there. It gets too much,
There is.
too
Yeah, it's too
confusing, and
much.
it's like, well, what am I meant to be? It's a little bit like the monologue I read. It's just like
Mm.
it's a contradictory, isn't it, sometimes? But reading your book, and I read it when I went away on holidays, I thought, yes, I so understand this. And it's just a nice book to have on your bedside when you're feeling shit about yourself, or those constant thoughts are just, bringing you down, that you feel stuck. And I know with a lot of the guests that I've had on the show, that's one word that keeps on coming up. I feel stuck. How do I move forward? And yeah, we're in the middle, right? We're in the middle, and we've seen what it's like to be young and to thrive, and all of a sudden we're feeling a little bit invisible, and then we're worried about the future of getting old. But that's why I always say I started this podcast, because I want women to know that, oh my gosh, there is so much more. There is so much more. You're doing your PhD at 54. Who says that's too
So much
old?
more.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, well, and who cares, right? Like, this
Who
is the
cares?
thing I want women to really understand in midlife. Who cares?
I know.
And for women who are like, I feel invisible, I would say, to whom? To whom do you feel invisible? And do you actually care? Like, you may feel invisible walking down the street because the 30-year-old's not looking at you.
Yeah.
Do you care?
I
Like, do you care about that?
No.
Because I was doing a podcast in the US the other day, and this gorgeous woman, she is 56, gorgeous blonde woman. I can't imagine she would ever be invisible. And she said, yeah, I'm invisible when I walk down the street. Like, people don't look at me. And I said, who? Who doesn't look at you? Do you actually care
Yeah.
that, or they're looking at your daughter, and then do you
Yeah.
care? What is the story that you're telling yourself about that? And what is the meaning from what is the meaning you are making from what is happening around you,
Yeah.
right? Because if we don't start to challenge and interrogate what's happening, how we feel, and the thought that that feeling is linked to, because every
Yeah.
feeling comes from a thought,
That's right.
then we can just immerse ourselves in, oh, I don't feel seen. Well, does it actually matter by that person when I want to be seen over here for this thing that I want to go and do? So let's
That's
go
right.
focus on that.
Yeah.
So we have to interrogate and unpack it. Otherwise, yes, things do shift, and we have to be very conscious and present and aware of who are we right now and what is the reality we're creating for ourselves. And that's our inner critic.
And we're going to constantly evolve, right? Well, you want to be evolving. So we're
Of
going to
course.
change what you've
Hopefully.
got. Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Well, that's right. And that's why we do the work. Like, what you place value on
That's why we
today
do the
isn't
work.
what you're going to place value in 10 years' time. So it's true. And you do care less, but you still do care. It's that fine line, and
Or you care about
myself.
different things.
Yes, absolutely. Like the stuff that I used to care about 10 years ago, I really don't care about anymore. But there are certain things that I still feel, obviously I feel intimidated or insecure about, and that might stay with me forever. But it's also coming to that realization that don't place so much importance on it, because all those beliefs just hold you back. And I remember someone said to me, Michelle, I feel that this is it before I started the podcast, because I was at a point in my life where I wanted to change, but I didn't know. And this woman said to me, I feel like you're seated at a desk and I've got to get you by the shoulders and I've got to drag you away. She goes, I feel your hesitation. And I thought, my God, like she actually could feel it, but I was feeling that as well because I was so stuck and I was so scared. So the minute
Yeah.
you start to unlock and free yourself, my God, it feels so much better. There's still more work to do, but take one step at a time.
Yeah. And that's why part 3 of the book's so important, right? Because that's the toolkit.
Yeah.
And that's the
So
toolkit for
important.
once we're looking at this inner critic work, okay, go do this. Because it's not enough to say to women, you have an inner critic or you live in a patriarchal world or
Yeah.
this or anything else. We have to, yes, we get to paint that picture so we understand. And then it's, okay, what do I do now? And that's part 3 of the book, the tools to help us rise, and life vision and purpose and meaning and career evolution and leadership and well-being. And how do we put these pieces together once we understand parts
Yeah.
1 and part 2?
Yeah. And it's a great sequence.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I thought it was
How
really
do we do
handy.
that? Thank you. How do we do that in a way that is tangible and practical and bite-sized so that we're not completely overwhelmed
Yeah. So
by
important.
the steps, for us? And we can just start where we are and go gently and do one thing, and then we do
Yeah.
another thing. It doesn't need to be a complete life
Yeah.
upheaval to
Yeah.
create some change.
And I think it's important for all of us to realize that we all do feel pretty much the same way. And I myself, like I said before, never thought that. But as I've gotten older, I can see, and women are so open and giving and sharing their stories. And that's what I love about podcasting. So I want to thank you again so much for writing this book. It's been a complete pleasure to have you on the show just to discuss it. And really, I've enjoyed your book, and I just want everyone to go out and get it. I've given a few of the books to some young women that I know because I thought this would be great for them to have, especially there's one in particular. She's a first-time mother. She's in her mid-30s, and she's really finding it tough at work, trying to balance it all, and how all of a sudden she's come back from maternity leave and all those promises are no longer there for her.
Yeah,
And
and
she's
everything's
like,
different, right?
yeah, this is so unfair. And I said, I'm gifting you this. Go away and read it.
Yes.
So,
Thank you. I'm
yeah,
so pleased you did.
yeah,
If we could give this book to every professional working woman
mm,
in every like that's our goal, right? In
yeah,
every organization and workplace, the world would
yes,
change.
yes, that's right.
Because from everything that I've seen and experienced in 35 years and all just everything that I've done, and is that the world of work's going to change when women rise up and say no more, like no more. And we do that individually and we do it collectively.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on a mission to get this book in the hands of 1 million women and as many men and male allies as we can,
Yeah,
because that's how we're going to create the change. Like when we wake up and when we go, oh, it's not what I thought it was. And this is the external and this is my work to do. And I'm no longer going to tolerate that. That's when we're going to see real change. So thank
awesome.
you so much for being part of that in gifting it to, women who will then have their own awakening
Yeah,
and will demand something better for themselves.
yes, that's it. Demand something better instead of
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
accepting the crumbs that we so stupidly just take. There's no need, is there? There really isn't any need. And obviously the
Yeah.
book is doing so well. Like you were saying, it's number one.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's been so beautifully received. So, yeah,
Congratulations and all the
so
best
delighted. Thank you.
now that you're launching in the States as well. So I'm sure your mission to have 1 million books spread around the world, I reckon you're going to get there.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for all the work that you do to support women and particularly to support women with their second act and in midlife. It is some of the most
Absolutely.
important work that we have to do. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, I like to conclude the episode with the same question I ask all my guests. Sometimes a powerful quote can offer us guidance and insight. Is there a quote that has stuck with you throughout your life that you'd like to share with us?
I have one that is a more recent one that from Brene Brown that I find is really resonant, particularly for this conversation that we're having around our story. Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as hard as spending our lives running from it.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so powerful. Bang
And I
on.
feel like that's our inner critic, right? Like that,
Yes.
it can be hard to do this work,
Yeah.
but it's harder in the long run to distract ourselves and,
Not do it.
run from the
Yeah.
work that we have to do. So that's
Yeah.
what I would leave you with.
I love her. She's a wise woman. She's so
We love
empowering,
Brene
isn't
Brown.
she? Yeah. Well, Megan, thank you once again for sharing your time. And I wish you all the best for your book tour. And yeah, I can't wait to see where your future takes you. All the best for your second act because it's an amazing one.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Your Second Act. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could rate and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback means the world to me.